Hey, glory to Jesus Christ. Glory forever. Hey, this is Father Anthony here. And that other person you see there, that is Julianna Golas. And we're blessed to have her with us today. She's been a wonderful friend, advisor. We've worshiped for many years together. Beautiful family, and I appreciate her coming on to share some wisdom as a parent and as someone who teaches this stuff, so we can be a little bit intentional about how we deal with the chaos and keep the chaos back and keep sanity in our lives. Well, as part of that, one of the things that we've shared is this deep breathing exercise. So let's go ahead and start with that. Remember, we're going to do 3 deep breaths. And as we breathe in, we're going to say the first half of the Jesus prayer. And as we breathe out, we're going to say the second half. Okay, ready? Let's breathe in slowly. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. Pause. Breathe out slowly. Have mercy on me, a sinner. Pause. Breathe in slowly. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. Pause. Breathe out slowly. Have mercy on me, a sinner. Pause. Breathe in slowly. Last time. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God. Pause. Breathe out slowly. Have mercy on me, a sinner. Okay, now that we've been reminded of who we are and in whose love we live, and we've kind of moved out of, whatever state we were in before. If you've been listening to the news, we put the news on for a little bit in the morning, and that can cause anxiety, and then check the email. Well, there's another temptation for anxiety and all this stuff. So we have to be intentional about how we manage our feelings and how we pastor to ourselves. And that deep breathing and prayer is very much a part of it. And we have kind of 2 obligations here as human beings. Yes, we love God, love neighbor. Well, yes, I'm going to break that up a little bit. We've got to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others. We have an obligation for our own well-being, and then we have to monitor how we affect those around us. And because that's part of the magic of being human, is that we have a profound effect on all the people around us. And whether that effect is good or bad, well, we have a lot of control over that. We don't have a control over how people react, but we do have a control over our own actions. So, Julianna, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing well, Father. Thanks so much for having me this morning.
And where are you?
I am in Rhode Island. We live in Richmond, Rhode Island, which we are the proud bearers of the title of the only town in Rhode Island right now that has no COVID-19 cases. So it's a good thing. And I am a faculty member at the University of Rhode Island, and I teach human development and family studies with kind of my niche is child development. And I've always been interested in people watching, right? And, what makes us tick, and, why we do what we do. And I originally went into psychology, thinking like that was the field if you're interested in people. But psychology focuses more on the pathology, what happens when things go awry and wrong. And I thought I'd really love to focus in on healthy development, what it means to stay on the right track. And I thought if you're going to do that, you need to start young. You need to start with children. And that's always where my interests lied. And then I accidentally found the human development major, which is a perfect fit. We are the prevention part of pathology, so in order to stop people from going off the track, what do we need to do? What do we really need to focus in on for healthy development? And that is our human development pathway, where there is such an emphasis on early childhood, and nurturing those things early and young. And so I practice what I preach. I try to, and that's why I've had 4 children, so they're my guinea pigs in this grand experiment. And so we've been blessed with a large family. So my husband Brian and I, and then we've got 4 children. Edward, who is 21, in college right now. Anna, who is 18, she is a senior in high school and missing all of those rites of passage right now that you have in your senior year, but so much more to look forward to. Joseph, who
and I'm
is...
sorry. So, and I don't know how this happened, but they couldn't hear you, but I will add it to the recording. So I'll give you some, forgive me. Oh my goodness. So
no worries.
So, completely my fault. So Julianna's a child development faculty member at the University of Rhode Island, and she practices these things on her children, right? And
yeah.
you're telling about your children. So start again with Eddie. Yeah.
Okay. So Ed is 21. He is at Bryant University, studying to be a math major and in economics. Anna is 18, a senior in high school, and I mentioned, she's missing all of those, senior rites of passage, all those fun things you do as a senior, but so much more to look forward to in, her years to come. Joseph is 15, very much looking forward to driving. He's, got speed in his feet. He's a runner, but and I hope he doesn't transfer that to the wheel. And then Thomas, my baby, but he's 13, hardly a baby anymore. And yeah, he's in 7th grade right now. So yeah, we've been blessed, like I said, with a big family, and they're all doing well. But it's work. It's work and a joy at the same time.
Yeah, and your husband Brian, he's a teacher.
And Brian, he's a teacher. Yeah, so we're all kind of in this world of education. He's a physics teacher in high school and a general science teacher. And so we have quickly jumped into the remote learning platform, which has, previously given me some anxiety, and that's where things are moving towards. And I've had reservations, but now that it's been thrust upon us, it's like, all right, well, here we go. We just have to deal with it and make the best of it. And so far, so good. I think under the quick learning curve, everyone's doing well with it.
Right, and I'm amazed by children. Children are pretty adaptable. They can respond pretty quickly to things. We did cyber school, so we're not like principled homeschoolers, but middle school is just such a hard time for kids that we wanted to be kind of there with them. And so when we went to Pennsylvania, they had a pretty good cyber school program. So we had them in that. And, so at least on the kids' end, they're familiar with the deal. You just they're back into that routine. It's pretty quick.
Right.
But yeah, for those of us who are used to lecturing, and then I'm in graduate school, and that's, the seminar that's the main experience of graduate school.
Especially the organic conversation. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's going to be different. I mean, I'm as an introvert, I'm a fan of the Oxford style of learning. Hey, tell me what I should read. We'll get together. We'll talk about it. I'm a big fan. Right. But it's to make URI is pretty big. University of Georgia is pretty big. To turn that big institution so quickly has been just a huge effort, right? And the fact that, man, I'm sure there are hiccups, and unfortunately some kids are going to fall through the cracks. Some kids who could really use, that face-to-face, hey, you all right? Yeah, and it might not happen, right? But for the most part, I'm so impressed with the response, and also it seems to me that the instructors are kind of going out of their way to not just say, hey, this is a tough time, helping us name it, right? But saying, look, we'll work with you. Maybe we'll let you turn something in late or, whatever.
Yeah, I do. I think there's a real culture of empathy and forgiveness that maybe didn't exist a few weeks ago. I think because this is such a shared burden that you understand a little bit more what others are dealing with. And so it's kind of called upon us to be more understanding and kind of temper our expectations a little bit. And so I think that's a good thing. And there are folks who are going to really struggle with it and fall through the cracks. But I also see that there's been this amazing response, at least by our university, that the support systems are like there, all ready to catch some folks, and at least understanding that. So, there's I think the response to this has really been impressive from so many angles.
Right. Yeah. Some of the functions that school, university performs and graduate school performs, you kind of turn those off a little bit. So the weed out form, you don't want to weed somebody out because this is the first time they've had to deal with this kind of stress. Right.
Exactly.
If they're going to be weeded out, or redirected is a better way. If they're going to be redirected, let it be because they'd be better off with their talents and abilities somewhere else. Yeah.
Right.
So it's interesting because it is a little bit schizophrenic. So, I'm in a PhD program where you do have kind of weed out courses, right? They'll say they're essential, right? I need to learn matrix algebra and integral calculus, and so I can still tell stories well. That's what I want to do. I want to collect stories and then tell them in a systematic way that allows us to understand things that I'm interested in, right? But you have to go through that. Everybody has to go through this, and it's really to make sure. And I've done it before. That's the other thing that's funny. I took this 20 years ago.
Right.
So they're like, yeah, we're going to see if you still got the chops, right? I'm like, okay, fine. But then to have those same professors, if you need to turn something in a little bit late, that's okay. Okay. How about if I just skip the course altogether?
Right.
How would that be?
Fast forward, yeah.
But it's good. And it's good because they're reacting as just human beings, like you were saying, this shared experience. We're in this together. Yeah,
I know. And so trying to look at the glass is half full kind of attitude towards all this, there are some silver linings. There really are. And it's a much better approach to look at it than all the worry and angst that's coming from the instability of it. Yeah. There are really opportunities here to shine and focus in on, what's essential and important in our lives.
Right. Yeah. And so I'm studying political science, right? And, it's all very interesting. And some of it's even topical, right? So I'm taking a class on international relations, and right now we're studying international political economy, right? So the question of autarky and codependence among nations and things like this is a big part of the discussion in our world right now. But it's secondary, it's tertiary. I would imagine, if I were like, what classes would I want to be taking during a coronavirus pandemic, right? I'd be like, oh, I want to be in your class.
So yeah, I'm actually teaching a parenting class right now. Yeah. Right, the focus is on supporting families, that family system, through good times and through bad, and so yeah, it's rather timely, this class and what we could learn from it, because suddenly our family units are spending way more time together than they might be used to. And that's, again, a blessing for us, that we should look at it that way. But it can be overwhelming for a lot of individuals. And I thinking about kind of speaking with you this morning, I was kind of, running through some ideas in my head. and it's something I've been thinking about over the past week or so, is by nature, I am a planner and a worrier, right? That's who I am. And, I have my 3 a.m. insomnia moments where I'm, kind of pacing and thinking, and how do I organize this? And I actually haven't been engaging in that type of behavior since a lot of this has happened. And I've wondered, why? Right? Shouldn't this set me off? Shouldn't this kind of bring more of that kind of worrying behavior and, planning and all this uncertainty? And I haven't been. I've been oddly calm during all of this. And now that makes me worry. Why am I so calm? Should I be more anxious? But part of it, I think, is that I have had the opportunity to find my rhythm again, right? And this is something I teach when I talk about young children and when I talk about families, are how important are rhythms, routines, and repetition, right? I call it the 3 R's, and that really is what kind of holds families together. Understanding kind of your natural biological needs of hunger and sleep, and a need for socialization and contact. And I think we oftentimes ignore some of that, or our basic needs, because of our hurried pace and schedules. And so there are times when I'm working and out and about, where I just ignore hunger. I just skipped breakfast and lunch, and here we are, it's, 4:00 in the afternoon, and well, I guess I'll just have to wait till dinner. Or, the need for sleep. I would work until late hours to wake up early to kind of start everything all over again. And taking away from the equation some of all the external obligations, I've really been able to fall back into some natural rhythms, and it has brought a sense of calmness to me. And so that's really made me think about families right now, and that we need to look at our social distancing. And it's unfortunate that we're calling it social distancing, right? Because we do need socialization. We're as humans, we need attachments. It's all about healthy relationships. If you look at the HDF major, everything just comes down to we need good relationships in our lives. That's important. So I rather look at it, instead of social isolation or social distancing, as physical distancing, right? That's what we have to do right now. But there's still that need to connect to people. That's important. But families are been given almost a gift for us to reconnect with each other, right? And find that rhythm once again, that has been masked by all of these external pressures. And so now that's all been removed, and here we are again, that we can just concentrate on ourselves and the people closest to us.
Great. Yeah, let's talk about that rhythms. That's by the way, that's a joke in our house. I'm always talking about the rhythm of the house, right? And my son Warren, he's the best at this. He'll say to somebody, "You're disrupting the rhythm of the house," right? And if I do something, he'll call me on it too, which is excellent, right? You're disrupting the rhythm of the house. So one of the things, let's start with the basics, right? Sleep. One of the, so there are different dynamics. Families have different rhythms, right? And I'm willing to say some of them are more healthy than others. One of the rhythms that was imposed on us before this was the rhythm of when the bus comes in the morning, right? So the bus comes here at 7:00 in the morning. Now, we've got 3 kids that ride the same bus. 2 of them are teenagers. One of them's younger. But I don't think that getting up at 6 or 6:30 is a great rhythm for a teenage kid.
No, not at all, right? And there's a ton of research to back that up. That teenage bodies are on a different rhythm than our adult bodies. And that's why we tend to see more car accidents with the teenagers in those morning hours, because their bodies are still desiring more sleep. They go to bed later. That's much more of their natural rhythm. And again, there's physiological reasons for that. Just release of certain hormones, kind of those sleep hormones that happen later for the teenager than they do for the adult body. So that early morning school start for the teens is not a healthy rhythm. And there's been movements to push that back,
Right.
but it disrupts busing, essentially, right? So if you start thinking about then sports afterwards, so if we start the school day later, then when are we going to start the sports? And then when, and so it begins this whole big domino effect, and then most people just back away from it, fine, let the school day start at 6:30, and we ignore, again, some of those important lessons about our rhythms. And I'm almost hoping now that since we've been thrust into this virtual world, that, hey, maybe we could put a class online, and the school day could be shorter, right? We don't have to spend so much time in the brick and mortar buildings.
Oh, Lord.
And so that it could be a good opportunity for schools to, kind of play around with this now that we know we can do it.
Right, and the idea isn't, to create anything new, but to look at the rhythms and what tradition has given us, about how things can be done well, and to rebuild this thing, because there are a lot of negative externalities for the way that we organize education right now. Right, there are a lot of, there's good that comes of it, of course, and this does give us an opportunity to rethink that. So how can I as a parent help with that rhythm of sleep?
I think one that we do have to recognize that our teens are on a different schedule, and there are a lot of parents who impose kind of a bedtime, for the teen, because you've got to get up early, and that's important. But we also don't want to go against their natural, rhythm and flow, and we also don't want to exert our will on teens. I think that's where a lot of conflict comes in between parents and children, is that we do know that sleep is important for them, but instead of having that conversation with them, sometimes we come down with these kind of rules and regulations, and then you get that counter will of, well, I'm not going to do what you tell me to do because you told me to do it. And so we've got to understand, one, for our teenagers especially, to treat them. You wouldn't impose that upon a friend. You wouldn't, punish a friend for misbehaving or doing something wrong. You'd have a conversation with them. And so we need to think about that with our teens too, having those frank conversations, discussing the need for good sleep, and how that helps and makes them function. They're rational. They're thinking beings that we can have that conversation with them.
Right.
For younger kids, we need to just start sooner, right? That if that's their norm and we establish bedtime routines and rituals, it's easy to maintain throughout their lifetime. But if that's chaotic from the beginning, they're just going to bring that kind of chaotic, disrupted sleep patterns with them as they're growing up as well.
Right. Yeah, and I want to make sure people hear what you're saying. So, teenagers will act kind of irrational, but often it's in response to us, right? It's in response to us. We turn it into a battle rather than into a cooperation, right? And so, we have this weird idea about how authority should be exercised, and it's bizarre. I would never allow someone to exercise authority over me in the way that sometimes I think should be done in a family. I'm like, wait, that's weird, right?
Right. Yeah.
They're very smart, and they're going to be living on their own in just a few years. So maybe I should say, hey, look, here's some things things to think about when you're coming up with your schedule. Come up with a schedule. Let's talk about this, right? That's much better than where then, you know,
Right.
the natural thing
It's
of them
within your will.
them trying to exert their God-given freedom is chaotic because it's in reaction to your misuse of authority.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's where you're trying to use your authority to to persuade them is never going to be an effective strategy with dealing with teens. It wouldn't be an effective strategy in a marriage with a spouse, right? That if you have concerns about your spouse, maybe because they're not getting sleep or they're not eating well, you wouldn't punish them. You wouldn't banish them to a room with social isolation until you listen to what I say. I mean, that's just bizarre. But yeah, there are some parents who do that. You're grounded until you do what I tell you. So
I think we are, but we do that even so as we're coming up with a rhythm, communication is part of that, right? And nagging and quiet resentment, those are not useful communication skills.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Right. Yeah. That open communication, and always starting with out of concern, right? I'm concerned about you. I'm concerned about behaviors that you're engaging in. Maybe I have concerns about your technology use, right? And rather than putting in things to monitor a child's technology, all these kind of tools that we have to stop children from going in certain places. I'd rather have conversations about some of those places I don't want them to go, and here's why. Here's some of the bad stuff that's out there, rather than let me lock it off so you never go there. Kids are going to find a way to get there, and then you don't have constant control over them when they are not in your home and they have access to some of these images or games or virtual friends. And so it's more helpful to be open and honest with children about your concerns and worries and why, to prevent them, so they could start to think about these things on their own and make their own good choices, rather than not go there because I put up barriers.
Right. Yeah. Well, I wonder if sometimes we have this idea that if I can just create a set of routines, right, and expectations, and I enforce them, so I put them in this established set of patterns, right, and then I'll just remove it and they'll keep doing it, right, naturally, because they've been. But that's not what we want. We're training people who do the right things out in the freedom of their, out of their will, their trained will, their subdued will, and out of a desire for virtue and all these things, rather than out of a, either a cost-benefit analysis or because we have somehow, programmed them.
Right. Because they're going to be confronted at some point with some bad choices in times when we're not there to stop it. And so you want them to be thoughtful and, be thinking about, why is it that I shouldn't go down this path, rather than, someone put some roadblocks here, and I normally have never gone down this path because the blocks have been here, but hey, now it's open and no one's looking, right? So we don't want that temptation, because it's going to happen, right? It's those temptations will happen. And so you hope that you've talked about these issues enough when the iron is cold, so when the iron is hot, they make the right choice and they don't touch it,
Right. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Okay, so schedules does seem to be a big part of the rhythm, right? And so let's get back to the just going to bed and getting up. Is that something where you just say, see you whenever you get up, hey, we're going to bed, have fun? How does that work?
Yeah. Again, I think for families with younger children, this is an easier thing to start from the beginning, that bedtimes should happen around routines too. Children don't have, they they don't go by watches, right? They don't really go by the clock. They don't know, especially have the analog clock. They don't know how to read that, right? So they're not looking at the clock to say, oh, bedtime. It's what kind of precedes bedtime that starts to remind their bodies that they're tired, right? So you have supper together as a family. There's some kind of family time. In my house, when children were younger, it then was bath and stories and then bed. And that routine just kind of naturally happened, and we never had any bedtime issues, because if for some reason bedtime needed to happen later because we'd been traveling or something, or we're in a strange place, a hotel, we still did bath and books and bed, right? So that could happen when it did at between 7 and 8 o'clock, or it happens at 10 o'clock. But that routine kind of told the body it's time to settle down. So establishing those routines early, and as you said, there's something to that, so then you just keep doing that. And I see my children now at 21 and 18 and 15, they do go through that same ritual of, we eat. Their extended time doing things after dinner definitely has grown. But everyone then kind of goes to their rooms and, washes up and, reads a little and goes to sleep. And, that's just been a pattern that's comfortable for them. Establishing that pattern when it's not been there can be more challenging, right? So if you now have a teen who goes off into their room and they're in front of a screen, which can really interrupt our natural rhythms to sleep, that unnatural light that we're getting from the screen, it messes with our mind to think, well, it's still daylight, be active. And we don't get those natural cues to say, I'm sleepy, I should wind down. So that's, again, when I think conversations are really important with teens, letting them know, this is exactly what's going on. This is why it's so hard for you to wake up in the morning, because your screen use is really interrupting some important patterns. How about we try something? How about, you stop using the screen at a certain time, and let's see the effect of that. Give me a couple days.
I like that, because this is hard, because what we see when a child is staying up too late, they're my words, right? Staying on the computer, using the phone later, you're like, man, that's got to stop. That's not good for them, right? And so you impose something. What you're saying is, look, if you let it go for a couple of days, you can point to the symptoms. You can say, hey, how are you feeling this morning?
Right.
How's this working for you?
Yeah, exactly. And then there's also sometimes some, just those natural consequences that you point out, right? That, you're not feeling well this morning. What time did you get to bed last night? And that could be a real problem. And there's so much out on, here's where, the screens can be a vice or a virtue. Here's a virtue. The information that we have out there that we can use for our benefit as parents, to show kids, this isn't me making this stuff up. There's information on the connectivity between screen use and sleep. Kids are smart enough to look at some of that and say, what can we change? I need to recruit you, child, to help come up with a better plan, right? Rather than me imposing something upon you. What do you think you could do to help fix some of this?
So we did a mixed strategy. We do say screens off at, this time, at 9 o'clock, no more screens. It's time to go to the rooms. We don't tell them they can't read or anything like that. But what's neat is we do have, so the internet's full of all kinds of stuff, right? My kids, we watched this video of how to make yourself miserable, I think is what it's called. It's by C.G. Gray. Anyways, he's got a bunch of brilliant videos, and it goes through the list, right? Oh, vary your sleep time a lot.
Yeah.
Right? Stay up and play with your computer late.
Right.
Fight with everybody in your life.
Yeah. There's all these great tools out there that we could use to have some of these awkward conversations that you just don't want to bring up. Again, imposing your will upon kids, but kind of sharing, these are my concerns. Do you have any ideas how you might be able to mediate this? And sometimes their solutions may not be what we would have chosen, but if they start to work, well, then go for it, right? And they're more likely to commit to something that they are part of, like they're signing on to it because they created it, rather than, you imposing it on them. So.
Right. Yeah, our will is so tied up in our ego, and we really have to take that out of the equation. What is best for my child? And it's easy for us because we're the smartest people in every room to say, oh, I know what's best for my child. I just need to tell them. Right.
You just need to do it. Yeah.
Right. So here's a question that I think people are going to have in response to this, because they've never seen how you actually behave with children and things. Are you saying that we let children develop their own standards, their own moral standards?
No. I think there's a couple things that children need, right, from us, right? And it's somewhat of a simple formula. They need stability, right? And stability means those routines and rituals. We help establish that in a home, right? There are certain things that we can do to model that, like creating even a family meal, right? There's a time for all of us to touch base. And that's always been sacred in my house. I've made sure that our dinner time kind of remains a point that we all share. And that's continued, for most of my children's lives. There are a few days where that doesn't happen, but for the most part it does. So we have some control over the stability in the household. Kids also need our presence, attachment. And I know some, people will argue, oh, it's quality over quantity. That's not true. Quantity really does matter. If your child is having a dilemma on a Tuesday night and you're not there, it's not going to make up that you've got something really cool planned for Saturday. They need you on Tuesday night to be present for them. So we've got the stability, we've got the attachment, and then good images, models, right? Children use us as a social reference. We certainly can't preach to them about what they should be doing when we're not engaging in that behavior. I do a talk for parents on kind of responsible technology use. And a lot of parents come thinking, oh, good, I'm going to get some advice on how to stop my kid from behaving badly. And it begins with kind of a self-assessment of one's own technology use. And most parents are like, oh my, I am just on this device way too much. And this is what I'm modeling for my children. So I think it begins with us looking at our own behaviors and modeling those good behaviors for kids. And then having those conversations, and even willing to admit that, we're not these perfect parents, right? We're not these perfect beings. We engage with struggles with, how to limit our technology use, how to prioritize things that are important in our lives. These are tough things, and they don't have simple solutions all the time. And so if we allow ourselves to look fallible in front of our children, that's a good thing, because it doesn't, set them up for failure. I can't possibly reach these kinds of standards. Let them know that, there are going to be times in your life where you fall, where you do make mistakes, where you do struggle. That's really important, but you can pick yourself back up. You can ask for forgiveness. You can try again, right? That motivation.
Right. Yeah, and I'll describe to him, look, this is what I'm going to do differently so that, I don't do this again, because I did not enjoy that. Like, if you have a problem with your temper, you have to apologize, but then you have to repent. You have to say, this is how I'm working on this, right? Because it's not healthy for me to be so, quick off the temper It's not good for y'all to be worried about things you say around me. So, describe to them that process.
I think that's a really important parenting lesson, is that we also expect our children to be more mature than they are. I know many adults who are not as mature as I would like them to be. And we sometimes have these unrealistic expectations for children to be more mature. Their immature brains are kind of hardwired to react ways that we don't necessarily want them to. And so, if, for instance, when children get frustrated, their kind of primitive brain has them lash out, right? They cry, they seek attention, they might do things that are inappropriate. And we as parents then feel like we want to stop that behavior. We've got to, punish it somehow, and then it'll stop. But we're asking then immature beings to act like mature beings. Instead, we need to teach children, instead of like what not to do, what to do in certain circumstances, right? So I've kind of gone about this in a long-winded way. Let me give some examples to really show what I mean. Instead of, I see a big problem right now. A lot of families are working remotely from home. And I've been in meetings where people are frustrated with their children in the background, like, jumping on the couch, or, can you open my cheese stick, or is it like, I'm in a meeting, like, don't you see, but so we're asking a lot of our kids to recognize, like, oh, you need quiet right now. I get that, and they're 6 or something, they don't get that. So we need to, before we go into these meetings, almost script out for children, instead of stopping the immature behavior, like what you're doing right now is wrong, go away, and I push you out of the way of the screen while I'm in the meeting. Before I go into the meeting, script out, here's what's going to happen. I am going to be preoccupied for a little bit. I'm not going to be able to answer your questions, but I know you might have an important question, while I'm in this meeting. You can just come over and, tap on my shoulder quietly, right? And I'll recognize you, right? Let's practice that, right? And so, role playing is really important for children. This is true, like when we go into church too. We have expectations for young children that they have to sit through the liturgy and be quiet and respectful. And that's a hard thing for young children to be able to do. So, we've got to get there in successive approximations. And instead of stopping, like, stop talking, stop running up and down the aisle, stop, knocking over the icons. Oh my gosh, we script behaviors. Here are the expectations when we do go in. Here's what I want you to do. Here's when you're starting to get frustrated. You could let me know, right? So then we could maybe go for a walk outside for a few minutes. So recognizing that children will get frustrated in situations and maybe not behave appropriately is also important for them. So they also know they've got an outlet when they do start to get frustrated. So scripting behaviors for kids is really, really important, and role-playing some of these things before you actually go in to do the real play is really an important parenting strategy. It's preventative.
What can we do when, because we're under a lot of pressure, what can we do as parents when to keep ourselves peaceful? I mean, our kids need us. Everybody needs us. We don't know. I mean, some of us don't know if we're going to have jobs tomorrow. There's all kinds of stress. What can we do? And here's another question. So, how much do you tell your children about what's going on? With the virus, with the economy. What's healthy for them to know, and what sorts of things do you kind of filter? Good
question. Let me start with the latter question first. For very young children, they don't know what normal is yet, right? So under these circumstances, this is just their new norm. So we want to stick to, again, those kind of routines and rituals that were happening beforehand, and make them even more stable right now, right? And like I said, we've almost been given this amazing opportunity to do that, where our external lives and our busy schedules, we were dropping kids off at before and after school care and activities, and all of that is kind of been on the sidelines now. So we can focus around some important just routines and rituals, like sharing meals together, family board game night, and then that could become your new norm for the rest of their childhood. Things that you establish right now are easily woven into the rest of their lives, doing like a movie night. And that becomes something that we'll continue to do even after this distancing it gets removed from our lives. So for young children, I don't think it's that big of a problem. Keep them close to the family bosom, right? And they don't need to know about a lot of these external pressures. For older kids who have access and they're hearing things from friends, from the media, from some of the sensationalization that goes on the media, it is important to have conversations with them. The best approach, and this is true, this transfers to a lot of parenting things, is ask them what they know. What have you heard? And then you can correct things that are wrong, and you can temper down some of the fear-mongering that's going on. And so a friend told me a story one time, and I think this is funny, and this is when we want to share too much with kids. And like, they need to know everything, and they need to be in the reality of life. So here's a story. It was a family who just had a new baby. And the baby's been home from a couple of days from the hospital. The little boy, I guess, was maybe like 4 years old or so at the time. And he said, Mom, how did Sally get here? And she's like, oh, okay, well, I've got to have that birds and bees talk with him, right? And she went into all the detail. And he was like, no, I thought she was sleeping upstairs and she's in the swing now, right? It's like, okay, we've got to figure out what's the real question kids are asking, and give them the information that they need to know. So asking them, what is it exactly that you want to know? What do you tell me what you know right now, and then you fill in the blanks. And the same is even true with teenagers, right? I mean, they're going to hear a lot of stuff, and some of it true, some of it not true. But having those kind of real conversations with them about here's what I think about that is important. Turning the TV off, though, for a while, I mean, that constant exposure to this is frightening, and I could see myself falling into it, and I've had to moderate my COVID-19 diet, because the more you read and hear about it, the more frightened you can get, but you also don't want to put your head in the sand and not be aware of what's going on. So I think limiting yourself to sources that you could trust. So I've been looking at the CDC. I've been looking at mental health sources, right? So I think getting your information from those sources are important, and then you can give kind of safe information to your children. So that answers kind of that latter question about what should you share.
Well,
find out what they know.
It answers the first one too, because what can I do to decrease my stress? Well, one, remove the unnecessary stresses. After about 5 minutes of reading those authoritative sites, anything else is just adding to your stress. It's not adding information, right?
Right.
So just stop. Okay, I got my morning update. Boom, I'm ready to hit the day, right? Cut out the things that are causing you anxiety. There's enough going on. You got to be more intentional about your peace. And that brings up another thing. So one of the things that I have to be careful of, bringing anxiety into my life, is social media. I just don't respond well when people are bizarre. And Facebook brings it out in some people.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm going to use that to segue into one more thing, and then I want to recap some of our main lessons. So,
yeah.
So one of the things, I mean, our kids are separated, and if you have introverts, that's one thing, right? If they're used to just kind of maybe playing games online with their friends or something. But what about the social ones? At what age is the texting with friends, is going on Facebook? Where are we at right now with the research on that for teenagers?
Yeah. So I want to bring up the idea of the introvert extrovert too, because I think it does seem easier for the introvert to step in to this world of like physical distancing, that as an introvert myself, I long for some of this opportunity, right? To just recharge, refuel. I don't have to, go to these extra events. Like when my calendar things started getting canceled, it's like, oh, silver lining, right? This is good. But on the other hand, I worry a lot about introverts during this time as well, because even introverts need the social connections. And extroverts are better at getting those social connections. They've got more of them, and so they've got more lines of communication. For the introvert, they've got fewer lines. They're usually very secure lines, but sometimes now, particularly with the physical distancing, some of those lines might be cut off. And so I think this is where social media has actually become a good thing, right? It allows us to connect a little bit more to people. And so I think parents need to ease up a little bit on some of the rules that they may have had in place already regarding, that kind of online gaming. It's an opportunity for these kids to connect and reach out to each other right now. And if you think of it like, okay, let's imagine them sitting around a board game playing Monopoly, we would be like, oh, that's fantastic, right? But instead they're building worlds in Minecraft, but alongside a friend. I still think that's good, right? So when it becomes a problem is when you're doing these things in isolation, and your virtual community is not your real community as well. And that's a conversation I've had with my children about their technology use, that your virtual friends should be your real friends, right? That you shouldn't have this whole virtual community that you've never met in real life, people who you wouldn't talk to in your real life. So when you create kind of these, virtual connections, they should be the people that you really do enjoy the company of. And so whether you're doing it from a screen or face-to-face, these are still the people you want in your life. And the screens are a poor substitute for the face-to-face. They really, they are. We need the face-to-face, but under these circumstances, this is a good second best at the moment.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I do enforce, and you can tell me, I'm willing to hear I'm wrong on this, but like we have a teenage girl, and she's allowed to text with a set of friends that we know, right? And she's not allowed to interact on social media and stuff outside of that. Is that too draconian, or is that just keeping them safe? Where's that at?
Yeah, no, I think it's a concern, right? That you've shared with Helen. Like, this is important, that that the world can be dangerous, right? And particularly if you're not able to see people up front, you don't know what their virtual personality that they've put on to get into your world is. and you're not able to make some good decisions
Oh yeah,
about these people.
and we talk about this. You know how it's probably some 55-year-old dude in his mom's basement, right? Yeah.
Right.
So it's part of our conversation, so they can make good decisions. It's just, you know, and we're going to loosen that up a little bit, but just so I don't worry too much. So let's go over some of these major lessons. One of the main things that I'm getting out of this is being intentional in how we set up our rhythm of our house and see this as an opportunity. So it may be the case in many of our homes where that evening dinner was not a family affair. It was, you know, hey, you divide and conquer. You know, you take them to soccer, I'll take these to music practice, whatever. We'll pick something up, you know. So maybe on Sundays, maybe you got together for dinner, but other than that, it was catch as catch can. Well, now, you know, you could because that's a rhythm, right? And so once we made this transition into doing everything at home, that could just become the new norm. It's just, you know, you kind of put food out and people graze and, you know, whatever. Rather, you could say, hey, look, this is a great opportunity. You know what? We're going to take turns fixing dinner. We're going to all eat every night together, dinner, right?
Yeah.
And it might be awkward for some families at first, but there's so much good socialization and communication and development of skills that happens around the dinner table.
Yeah, and it's been a kind of a cultural tradition that's been in place for centuries to protect families, right? To bring us together is that shared meal, the preparation, the actual eating of the meal, and then the cleanup of it. And, you know, these external pressures and good things, right? I mean, like we make these concerted efforts to, you know, put our kids in soccer and, you know, music lessons, and because we want what's best for them, but they interrupt that really vital mechanism that was in place to protect the family. And so I think, we've been given this as a gift almost to say, hey, let's bring this back, you know, even if it is the Sunday dinner, right? I mean, I don't have the expectation that parents need to do this every single day. But to make time for it at least once, something to look forward to. Friday night dinners, you know, Sunday night dinners, or Tuesday night dinners, like it doesn't matter, but make one of those valued. And then maybe even something you don't need to think about. I mean, we have in our family, we call it Friday night, and it's always, you know, cheese and hummus and, you know, fruit and like that. So like I don't have to think about the prep. We all just start chopping and adding to the plate, and it's this kind of communal. We eat it in the living room, and it, you know, it's easy, but it brings us together. And so something like that too can, you know, be worked. It doesn't have to be elaborate. It doesn't have to be the giant roast turkey and you work all day to prepare it.
Right, because then man, you can bring in these weird expectations because the dinners that you remember from your youth are these elaborate affairs, you know, and you're probably not remembering the normal evenings that were just routine. You're only remembering the big Thanksgiving or something like that.
Right.
It's not sustainable. It's not sustainable. So let me as we wrap up, let me throw one more at you that we can be intentional about that I think is a rhythm that, for various good reasons, you know, maybe, but for whatever reasons, it's gone away. It's atrophied. And that is kind of home worship. Right, so we can't even gather together for church once a week. We can't even gather together for church for Pascha, right? And if anyone was going to go to church once a year, it was going to be at Pascha, right? Can't do that, right? Well, here's the thing, right? Rather than saying, oh well, I guess we can't do that this year because we're so used to being, you know, everything centered around that physical location. When we actually bring it into our homes, we're doing something incredibly biblical. We're not replacing that other thing. You know, the Eucharist is the center of our life as Christians, of course. But if we do some worship during Holy Week and throughout this time of solitude, you know, it's going to strengthen that rhythm. It's going to bring grace into it, right? And that grace used to come from the family trip to church, maybe, right? But now that family trip to church is going to be connected to something that was done together in the home. And I tell you, worship at church is fantastic, right? It's beautiful. But having your kids help with the readings at your icon corner, at your kitchen table, that just changes everything. It changes everything.
Yeah. I know. Again, like it's this opportunity's been thrust upon us, and we just have to see it and take advantage of it. That even if it is, just a minute or two that we spend, worshiping together as a family, is saying grace before the meal, right? These are things that we could start to put in place. I know someone mentioned kind of Easter's been canceled. Well, it's not canceled. It's still going to come, and we're going to be celebrating in a different way than we're used to, but the meaning is still there. And yeah, I'm kind of glad some of that other external stuff has been canceled. I hope that happens around Christmas time too, right? So we can focus in on the meaningful portion of that.
Right, and don't mishear Julianna. See, what she's saying is, look, when you're doing it together as a family, it's beautiful when it's done full, but there's not that communication about it, right? When you're doing it together, you're like, look, Christ is risen. He was put in a tomb, and death couldn't hold him. He's out, right? You can have these kind of conversations around the worship that's going to imbue it with meaning that will then be taken to the church worship next time. So again, the home church becomes connected and not just dependent on the parish church, right?
Yeah, and that's when we look at truly what's essential in our lives, it comes back down to these relationships with your family and those people who are closest to you. And so that's what you have control over, right? We can't control what's going on in the world. I have no power to get more ventilators or, change the spread or the curve of this, but I do have some control over the health and well-being of my family. And some of that's through modeling and social referencing, so they could, see what I'm doing and mimic some of that, and kind of create these opportunities for us to get closer, rather than having the external world separate us and just kind of then keep our fingers crossed and once a year we'll get together for Pascha, and that's not good enough. That's not good enough.
Well, I am so happy that we were able to spend this time together, and that I was able to share your witness and your wisdom with a bigger audience. Really do appreciate it, and we'll do it again, okay?
That sounds wonderful, Father. Thanks so much for having me. Thanks for everyone for listening.
Fantastic. So everybody, I do apologize. Of course, I pushed a couple of wrong buttons, so I disappeared for a little while, and Julianna was missing for a few minutes at the beginning. I'm going to fix that for when we post it, so it'll all be fine when we get when people watch this later. I'm still learning.
The UPS truck went by and my dog lost it. So
yeah, lots of these things that come in. And I've got my notes from my daughter Helen. If you enjoyed this interview, please hit like on your screen. If you want to see more, subscribe to this live stream, this channel, and ring the bell to enable notifications. If you have input, I'd love to hear from you. You can write to me on email at fatheranthony@yahoo.com. That's probably the best way to do it. You can find me sometimes on Facebook. Sometimes I'm not on Facebook, so that's not as reliable as email. But either way, until tomorrow, Godspeed.